So welcome to the Grand Rapids Label video blog series. This is installment number 5, I believe, of our series dedicated to innovation discussions in the industrial durable label space. I'm Bill Bergstrom, Vice President of Sales and Marketing with Grand Rapids Label, a decades-old label converter based here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And today we're going to talk about automation and automation as it applies to labeling and again, industrial durable label space that we live in. So today we're super excited to have Jerry Wade with us. Jerry's a 23-year veteran of CTM. You can see the logo behind Jerry. CTM Labeling Systems, a North American, if not global power in providing automated labeling, print and apply equipment, things of that nature. So Jerry, say hello.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate the opportunity. We've been talking about this for a little bit now, but it's finally nice to get it off the ground. And boy, we've had some crazy things going on, so we got a lot to talk about, right? But it's all good stuff.
Yeah, right. You don't have to work very hard to tee up crazy, given that it's, here we are in early 2022, and so for sure we'll get to that. Again, just really quickly for the listener, for the innovation series that we try and do, we're going to certainly chat about state of the market, right? We'll talk about, kind of crazy and state of the market, how we got here and kind of what we're experiencing. And then we'll turn it again to innovation. I know you're ready to chat about, what we may see in 2022 and beyond. And then we definitely want to kind of close the conversation with what can organizations like Grand Rapids Label and others, right, who are considering automation, what kind of things can we be asking ourselves? What kind of conversations should we be having? So I'm going to be quiet, right? Again, you're the expert in what we're going to talk about. Real excited to get going. So if you want, first of all, a little bit about yourself and CTM, and then let's dive right in. Let's go into kind of state of the market and kind of the perfect storm that you have brewing.
Absolutely. Well, just a little bit about myself, Bill, without going into a lot of detail, spending a lot of time. I've been with CTM now for about 23 years, going on 24 actually as a manufacturer's rep. And our whole goal is to set up distribution as we have done with Grand Rapids. And my main focus on all of this has always been to come up with labeling solutions that best meets the distribution's customers' needs. So through that navigation of optimal solutions that we try to find, being an engineering company and a manufacturing company, CTM has had the opportunity to really look at some of the different things that customers are trying to find to solve their pressure-sensitive labeling needs. And as you know, it's a perfect storm like we've talked about. This market is crazy right now. Bill, you and I were talking about things that just a year ago have changed dramatically to what we're doing for this presentation here, just to try to educate some people on some of the solutions for automation. And in saying that, it's just been one heck of a ride, but we've got some really good tips I think we can cover without diving so far into the world of confusion. I think we kind of, we get to a point where we try to come up with these big glamorous things to automate. It doesn't have to be that tough. So I want to just try to pick away a little bit of what the options are for some of the customers that we're seeing and some of the changes that are taking place because of this perfect storm, as you mentioned.
Yeah. So let's dive in, right? Lots of things, and some of them just off the top of our head. Lots of things create this perfect storm. So expand on that for us here. Okay. State of the market. What's happening out there that's making automation such an important topic for so many people?
And that's a great starting point. And I think before we dive into what's going on today, we have to kind of keep a pulse on what's happened to get us to where we are now, right? So if you recall, prior to COVID in 2020, our economy was pretty good. I mean, it was on fire almost. I mean, there's a lot in the pipeline. People were, struggling to keep up a little bit even then prior to COVID. And then what happens is we get the COVID pandemic that hit. So we've got a real strong market. People are busy. Labor's a little tight even then. COVID hit, it starts putting everything on its ear. So we start seeing the labor shortages as everybody knows. Delivery schedules are starting to go out the window. It's hard to keep up. Supply chains are starting to fall apart. Shipping delays. But we also start seeing windfall opportunities also, right? So people started needing products relative to the COVID pandemic, whether it was masks, test kits, or the whatevers, or people are staying home more, so your customers are starting to need to get more product out the door quicker. So these windfall opportunities started to come into play also. So the need for automation, when you and I maybe talked a year ago, Bill, to your customers, it kind of went from a efficiency, becoming more efficient for them to label their product, to more of a how do I survive this thing, right? So it became as an option of efficiency. Now it's a survival tool that we're utilizing and trying to flip over rocks to see what customers can do to stay above this thing.
Yeah, the conversation about automation always, to your point, but it got real serious real fast on people. And so how does a CTM help, you know, when let's go ahead and embrace the word survival, when that's happening, you know, again, in kind of current state, how do you kind of keep people calm?
Yeah.
And what are those key conversations maybe right now, again, that help people say, okay, we can do this, we can make this move, and it's going to be value not only now but long term as well.
Right. And I think that the key there is the constants are that we're in right now, they're not going to change for a while. And I think once we've realized that the supply chain is still going to be a little bit broken, probably through 23 or at least into 23, right? Deliveries are still going to be tight. I think once we wrap our hands around the fact, the customers wrap their hands around the fact that this isn't going away relatively soon. There's no light at the end of the tunnel that's going to happen relatively soon. This is going to be a process. It's not going to probably start taping off till the end of 22, maybe into 23, right? But once we come to grips with that and we understand the constants of, we're going to still probably have some shipping, delivery issues, shipping issues, delays in the supply chain, all those things that we're all experiencing. Once we kind of come to grips with that and start looking at the bottlenecks relative to, in our case, labeling, right? We can start setting up a plan of action. This thing of kicking the can down the road is over. People really need to start not only looking at automation as a tool for efficiency, but even as important, this could be a really great opportunity for customers to take a look at automation as a tool to compete. Right, we kind of get back in where before we could throw labor at the problem and it would help take care of the labeling issues or delays and all the things that people fought. Those things that we could throw at it are now gone, right? Those are part of the things we're not going to change today. But we can automate, grab some of this low-lying fruit through the labeling, whether it's label applicators, labeling cases, or whatever. We just have to always remember, we're not going to fix the present. I mean, we're all in the soup, so to speak, right? But what we can do is become more efficient to compete better against our competition, right? It kind of reminds me, as funny as this sounds, I'm sure you've heard the story about the bear, two guys going to the wood, woods come across this bear, right? And the one buddy tells his one buddy, says, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm taking my shoes off." He goes, "Well, you're not going to outrun the bear, right?" He's like, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you." Right. So that's kind of where we're at. We're not going to, the bear is the things we're not going to be able to change, right, Bill?
Right.
But what we can do is become more competitive in our automation process so that we can outrun our competition or stay ahead of these guys. And we got some great tools that can get you, your customers into the automation, not only as for efficiency, but to survive, that are relatively quick on ROI, and they're not going to be this thing that we're going to try to change the world with, but just these little things that will help them get deliveries a little quicker.
So before we go into horizons that are maybe a little bit beyond, you know, say like 2022 and 23, let's stay there, right? You throw out a keyword, and that's bottleneck in kind of this conversation of current state. And again, I know we'll get to this conversation about key questions we can be asking ourselves, but maybe let's unpack this one just for a little bit, you know, right here, right now, because I like your idea of, you know, hey, embrace the fact that these conditions are going to exist for a little while. So kind of lamenting it or kind of belly aching about it or complaining about it, it's not doing anybody any good.
That's right.
So, you know, accept that. And then, what's a bottleneck conversation look like current state, right? Like, how do I decipher where I really have a bottleneck versus maybe this perception of, gosh, I really wish, or I think over here is where we have one.
Right. I think what I have found in my years of dealing with distribution and customers is they know these bottlenecks. And the question was always, what keeps you up at night? And boy, it comes up real quick. And sometimes it's not that complicated. Like a lot of the opportunities that we're fixing right now are just case labeling opportunities. In the past, that you would have somebody that would manually apply. It would stand between two lines. The case is coming out of a paper machine, and they would apply a label on this by hand. Well, that laborer or that person is no longer there to do that. So, sometimes it's as simple as just having a label put on a case with a labeler that you would roll up to an existing line. And truthfully, that's a real big growth in our business that we see in a real quick entry-level automation of labeling that has a very big impact on the automation process. But a lot of it is just what's keeping them up at night. So I know anybody that's listening to this podcast is pretty much saying, I know exactly where it is. But for those that maybe not know where to begin, look at those things that are a little further down the line that are going to take a lot less turnaround and a lot less impact to change.
Okay. I know I can overcomplicate things, so it's always great to remind me that to keep it simple there.
Yeah.
So, so great context there, for again, kind of current state. Let's actually shift a little bit. Now, we had talked a little bit about this, and I kind of believe if you get too far out, in the future, it gets a little nebulous, right? It gets a little hard to have that conversation.
Yeah.
But, let's say things do settle down, right? There's some return to normalcy, 2023. Are there key points to be thinking about, or again, do you see conditions that kind of continue to evolve the automation conversation for an organization? Again, let's say it's 2024 now, and boy, we learned a lot from the COVID time frame, but the world again looks a little bit different. Are you guys having that conversation at CTM and what that looks like?
Yeah, I think like everything, when you stumble, you get hurt a little bit, you kind of have to stand up and brush yourself off and then take a look at the past in terms of what has happened. For our distribution, what we are finding is there's a lot of customers that have wanted to automate, but a lot of them just don't know or when to pull the trigger on this thing or what to do. And I think that's where, companies like Grand Rapids Label come in. Okay, so I have a bottleneck. I've identified where the problem is and potentially what I want to change for pressure-sensitive labeling to become more efficient and or survive. Okay, so now what? So the one thing I think that we have learned through this whole process is a lot of customers just really don't know how to get it started and who to turn to start that discussion. And I think that's where it's key, where distributors such as Grand Rapids Label, they come in, they've got the technical background, they've got the follow-up, and some of the things that I would encourage your customers to look at are like things like, where's the tech support coming from? Long after the sale, how do I come up with the right solution? There's a lot of different ways to offer up labeling solutions, but there's a process that you walk through with a distributor like Grand Rapids to kind of ask the right questions. Where are you at right now? More importantly, where do you want to go, and what's keeping you up at night, right? You start that dialogue. And then after the customer starts looking at the information, the customer should start thinking about, okay, well, what else is important? So what they should be asking is, where's the tech support coming from? Okay. The distributor, where's the recommended spare parts? Are there spare parts available? Is the manufacturer of the equipment, like CTM, are they just an assembly house, or do they actually manufacture the parts that go into it? Because remember, spare parts is a pretty big part of the problem today too, right?
Tricky, yeah.
You can have a piece of equipment that runs fine, but say the board goes out and that board's coming from overseas or something, how are people adapting to that? So is the supplier distributor and the channels that are supporting the customer, are they all in place long term as well? So you look beyond you start with the right solution, and then you look to make sure that whatever solution the distributor recommends for your customer, that this is how we take the next step, which is supporting the heck out of it.
Yeah.
That's what we described.
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought of it when we had some pre-discussions here. A part of what jumps into my mind is this idea of the partnership and the peace of mind that gives you the confidence to go ahead and say, hey, automation can have a positive impact on my organization. And to your point, if I'm not out here on an island trying to figure it out on my own,
right,
then jumping off is that much easier, whether we're in some of the unique situation we're in today in 2022, or we get through that process and we look back to your point of what we learned, and now it's 2024.
Right.
So that it's funny. I hadn't really triggered in my mind is that some of that peace of mind, that support gives you that opportunity to again kind of jump off at the right time, and kind of take the risk of investment, not the risk of results, but the risk of investment, right?
Yeah, and I think the other thing, to answer part of your question too, Bill, is it's one of the other things that I learned I never really saw it coming from a manufacturer's rep, but I saw the story unfold, was the fact that you are in a position, like you said, come 2024, you put some automation in place, so you're becoming more efficient. The fact that you have now put yourself in a position to be ready for these changes and or windfalls, you would not believe the number of opportunities that distribution has had to pass away because they knew that they could not meet the demand that the customer needed. Whether it was to bid on the contract, even go to bed, to bat for the customer, they just didn't have the tools in place that they could fulfill that order. But now, because of that stinging of not being able to even get up to bat, that automation that they're putting in play now, or they will go forward putting in the automation, will better align them for these windfall opportunities, whether because of COVID or just because maybe there's a big application that they have an opportunity to get. They're now in a position to go after that business now that they've never been able to do in the past.
Yeah, that's a really good point of that preparedness for what, right? If we've learned anything from the COVID thing, there's some unknowns out there, right? And as best we can be prepared for them and to capitalize on them. Hey, let's do it. That's awesome. So let's close today with, again, maybe a little bit of a summary, right? Yeah. We've talked, quick kind of rapid fire here. We've talked about a bunch of key things to consider. But if I'm again, Grand Rapids Label, or a company like Grand Rapids Label, that is thinking about automation and that efficiency or survival conversation by leveraging better efficiencies, maybe 2-3 key conversations that we should be having in order to help formulate a go forward path.
Yeah, I think the first one is to identify that you have a bottleneck problem in labeling, and the second one is, I'm ready to change it. And then the question then rolls to, how am I going to do that? Again, the present things that are in place now that we know aren't going to change, everybody's facing those, but what can we do as a company to become a little bit more efficient? And those are the questions that will need to be addressed. So it's identifying that you in fact are ready to make a change or have the bottlenecks in labeling, and more important, that you're willing to reach out to people like Grand Rapids to help them to let them offer up solutions to get through these, and then pull the trigger and do them.
Yeah. Go figure.
Doing it.
Go figure. There are experts out there like hopefully us and you guys that can really honestly help, right? So shocker.
Absolutely. We'd love to help them. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much. We always like to keep these to, fairly finite period of time. There's a ton more to talk about. We really enjoy our partnership with you. Appreciate the time to join us today. Hopefully the listener comes away with, again, some key questions and some thoughts that say, hey, this is something we need to really look into, take advantage of, and position ourselves to be better going forward. Thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you, Bill, for the opportunity, and good luck to all the customers out there. We've got solutions. Just come and ask for our help. We'll gladly help them. And I'm not saying that as a sales guy. I truly feel there's some great opportunities to help these companies get through some of these tough times that we've been through. So let's do that for them.
Absolutely. Go figure. Together we'll be better, right?
Thank you.
Thank you again. Really appreciate it. And you and I, no doubt, will talk really, really soon.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks again, Bill.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.